My name is Jeff Brown. I'm a patented inventor, and I call myself the bipolarist.
Can you tell me about your own mental health journey?
Sure. And more than anything, Michael, thank you for inviting me on the platform. Things like this and sharing my story really help me give back to the community that's helped me so much, but make me feel like it's all been worthwhile. So I can
Well,
tell you
thank
about
you.
my, yeah, man. And thanks for the work you're doing. So yeah, to answer your question, I think my journey it started in school with recognizing or being recognized as being different. Um, I was lucky to have been blessed with this big head that I get from my dad and a lot of initiative that I get from my Dominican mother. And to be privileged to live in near Washington, D.C. in Fairfax County. In this area, we have uh, the good fortune to, for the most part, have a lot of economic opportunities and a large tax base that helps fund really good school systems, like the one that I grew up in. I started off in private school and I think in Catholic school. And then that's when they identified that I was like GT. So we used to call it back in the day. Um, School was easy for me and I got bored quickly. And in fifth grade, I remember in particular when I transferred to public school, um, they had us in the combination fourth and fifth grader class. I was a fifth grader. And I remember like the extra noise and for some reason the really bright lights in that class was really distracting and I couldn't focus. I really don't know that I ever really learned double digit multiplication because of that classroom. But the teacher, Mrs. Barnes, um, she watched me basically reorganize my desk over and over and over. And I think what I was trying to do is like establish some kind of control, create some sort of, filter, or if I could control the order of my pencils and papers, maybe I could find a way to focus even though it was loud in the classroom with all the fourth graders. Um, the solution wound up not being organizing my desk. It wound up being that they put me on the computer. And so being on the computer gave me an escape from the noise. And then like 30 years later, I come to find out from my mother that that teacher had recommended or had suggested that I be on Ritalin, but I never knew. So I think my journey started in school. Um, as soon as fifth grade, maybe earlier. I remember my parents were divorced right before I was one. So my mother told me later too that my dentist, when I was a kid, uh, had commented because I used to chew my tongue and my gums or my cheeks, that this could be a sign of depression, kind of like I guess kind of like some self-harm. And when I was young, dealing with the fact that my parents didn't live in the same household and how that made our family different really really troubled me. And I think that which I guess we interpret now as trauma may have given me some different adjusting to go through. And I think I turned inward, and as an introvert, uh, I found escape in my mind and in my imagination. And I think that's what distinguishes me and has, since then. I have a very active, perhaps overactive, whatever that means, mind. So I think that's when it started in grade school.
What was it like when you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder?
Yeah, so I should say um, I've been diagnosed with um, at one point in high school when I was I think a sophomore and working I went to a magnet program for tech for information for was it network administration, and I was struggling, and a teacher suggested that I get tested or see a psychiatrist, and that psychiatrist suggested I had obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and gave me an antidepressant, and it didn't stick. I didn't like how it made me feel, and it turns out the skills that I had with working in tech were more adaptive than not. This is like 1996 or five. So that feedback or that diagnosis didn't stick for me. But when I was 19, I went to BCU out of high school, and in sophomore year, or the second semester of freshman year, actually, I got pretty depressed. And my peers, my resident assistant, my best friend, uh, were worried about me. And so that was the first time I think that anyone ever intervened because of depression for me. I didn't get diagnosed with bipolar disorder for another 2.5 years. Uh, but it came at the end of what was effectively like a 2-year mismedication, is one way we would call it, right? Or being poisoned by a psychiatrist who didn't believe my opinion was valid or relevant to my treatment plan. So in 2001, September, or was it, no, July, my dad had a heart attack, a second heart attack, and a quadruple bypass, and almost didn't come out of or come off the breathing machine. And it shocked me. It was not what I wanted to do, be away in school and be away from my dad. I wanted to be home, care for my father, and be with him, because I didn't grow up with him, and I really like in my house. He was always active or around, but I wanted to spend time and learn from my father. So um, I asked for an antidepressant when that happened, because my parents sort of, really, and him included, wanted me to go back to school and finish my degree. And so the antidepressant they gave me, Wellbutrin, didn't stick. And then it wasn't good for me anyway, and made me irritable. So I had my general practitioner change it. He gave me Lexapro at 5 milligrams, and suggested that if I needed to take more, if it's not effective, that he'd have to put me in touch with a specialist. So that ended up happening, and that specialist increased the dose from 5 milligrams to 20 milligrams until I was eventually hospitalized in May 2003. And that's when I got what I call my bipolar merit badge. So yeah, I think that experience was really surreal. It's strange how, I'll say, how entitled medical professionals feel to tell you how you're supposed to behave.
Right.
And for someone who doesn't really know you that well, to give you medication that can change you and your behavior, in your life in every aspect, um, and not to get time to know you well enough. They may do like an hour intake. They might do 2 or 3, but then they give you medicine and they expect you to come back in a month or two, let them know how it's working. A lot can go wrong, and a lot did for me. We would tell my mother, and I both would tell my doctor, he's acting strange. He's not doing well in school. Can't focus. He's falling asleep. I was basically narcoleptic. My brain was revving out. And the medication, the SS Lexapro in this case, was very effective at getting out of depression. But for someone with my neurotype, I'm pretty sensitive to that type of medication, to SSRIs. So it shot me manic. So for like 2 years, my brain would just rev out. And I remember, I can go on about this, but I remember like waking up places and not knowing how I got there.
Wow.
Hours away from home. Very strange things happen. So eventually, they had to hospitalize me, and that was a whole escapade, because I'm not easy to catch. So that's a story too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And when you just told your story publicly, how did that feel?
Well, the thing about me is, I don't know if this is really, you may have had a different experience. I think it doesn't go this way for everybody, but that day I had just turned 21, that month, and I decided that I was going to propose to my girlfriend, and for some reason I felt like the need to call the police, because I didn't think that she'd believe me. Some weird hang up I have about not being believed. It came full circle later in my career, and I called the police to let them know, queued them up to it, and they were like, "All right, this guy's acting weird." They didn't give it much mind or pay it much mind. But then when I did propose to my now ex-wife, she didn't believe me either. She thought there was something off, there's something wrong. So she called my best friend, who at that time was at UVA, and he called my mother, and then they all sort of convened on me in Richmond to check on me. And I was lucky that they did. But I'm very hard to catch. So at that time too, I was a better, more physical specimen, better physical specimen, and fast. And um, yeah, it took a lot to subdue me. Sorry, having a flashback. And it took a lot of medication to slow me down. So in the hospital, after about 2 weeks, I had been on countless medications, and I think I left with like 4 prescriptions. And it's, in 2 weeks to be onboarded into 4 prescriptions that, if you read the bottle of the literature, it should take 4 to 6 weeks to adjust to any one of them. I mean, that's a lot, that's a lot. And so I was pretty turned around in the hospital. So the doctors asked my mother, uh, my parents, to bring my friends and family in to see if they could like help calm me down, or jog my memory, because like I was gone. I wasn't making any sense. And I mean, I'd never lost my liberty before. So to be trapped and be told that I was the one that was wrong, or you know that I couldn't be trusted, my senses and my perception couldn't be trusted, was really traumatizing. So they invited everybody in, or probably a couple dozen people, friends, and my RA was there, and he's still in my life. And of course, well, I called her my fiance. She was in with my mom often. My cousins, I had uncles, father and stepfather. Uh, a lot of people came in and they saw me at my absolute worst, the worst I'd ever been. And I think the worst I've been since. So how did it feel? Well, I didn't get the chance to speak privately about my condition. You see, is the point? Like that, they came in and sort of my trust was violated immediately. There was no protection for me to come out as bipolar. So when I was discharged from the hospital, my first stop was I thought I had bought this Ducati motorcycle, so I still had the helmet. I didn't have the bike, but I put the helmet on and I demanded that my mother and girlfriend drive me to the state corporation commission, and I was going to register my business. I was gonna prove it to everybody that I was right about what. And from that day, I never didn't talk about bipolar. It was, if this is what you call me, or that you need to describe me as, that's fine. But get out of my way, world, because I have things to do and I don't have time to be told that I'm the problem. I'll take the medication. Yeah. What are you going to do to help me? Or are you going to get in my way? So I always sort of had that attitude. Then I think it was a kind of a way to not confront the trauma of being misunderstood for so long, was to embrace the diagnosis as a way to understand or refactor my identity, for better or worse. So it felt in a strange way as like a blessing, because in a weird way, it forgave how I've been weird my whole life, raising my hand too much in class, or talking too fast sometimes, or being really excitable. Uh, I've never been violent to this day. I'm 42 now. But I have been aggressive, I have been aggressive and like argumentative. That's a big one. So all of those stories that I could remember of like bickering or getting suspended in high school, or arguing with friends or teachers, then proving myself intellectually, and completely unnecessarily, fed into, oh, that was bipolar disorder. That's what that is. And strangely, that's what makes me who I am. And if that's how other people see me, friends and family and classmates and teachers, so be it. Because why should I be ashamed of how I was born?
Yeah.
Or why should I be ashamed of what, in my mind at that time and for a long time, what was done to me? I told the doctor what was happening, you know? So whose fault is it that I got manic? You know? So yeah, I think coming out as bipolar was never really like I came out of the hospital and I was just me again, you know.
Yeah.
But now I had a way to explain it better. I think that's really how I would frame it. Does that make sense? I hope so. I
Yeah,
ramble
no, that
sometimes.
makes
Okay,
sense.
good.
And I live with bipolar disorder too.
Yeah.
And I
So
actually wasn't diagnosed till I was 37, and I'm 43 now, so only 6 years ago. And I always think like, what would my life been if I knew all this, or I wasn't scared of the stigma when I was much younger. Uh, but talking to people like you and other people with similar lived experience goes a long way for me. Do you feel the same way?
oh, so much so. Yeah, so much so. Um, I'm sorry, I just had a flashback to reading this biography of Jim Carrey, and that was the first time I'd ever seen the words manic depression. I didn't know what it meant, but I wanted to put that in. That was in fifth grade. So being candid about my condition, like when I transferred schools to George Mason in that year, and being candid about and I couldn't stop talking about bipolar by then, right? It was like what had just happened in the spring before, and it was how I am, and it was a real identity for me. I think it happens to a lot of folks when they get their diagnosis. It's like, oh, this explains everything to us, you know. But other people see it, I think, as an excuse for misbehavior. And so I would advocate from with everyone. You know, I started a chess club at George Mason to make friends when I was a commuter student, and I explained to everyone that I met, it's like, hey, I have bipolar disorder. I take medication for it, so you have to pardon me if I'm a little groggy, And I talked to the Disability Resource Center at school. They were great, and talked to my teachers to help them understand, like, hey, I'm adjusting to all this medication. It's not easy, so just bear with me. And so that type of self-identification with it led to like type of self-advocacy, and then opening up about it. It's crazy. Like I just had a friend who I didn't know was autistic. We went to leadership school at George Mason in 2006, and he just reached out to me this past October for help in his career as he's being, effectively um, mistreated by his organization. But he met me when I was that kid, going class to class, knocking on offices and asking staff for help or how they could help with chess club, And I'm Jeff Brown, and this is what I'm about, what I deal with. And so I think on campus then I was really early to talking about this, and most people shied away from it. It wasn't something that at that time was like, it didn't have the position or the prevalence in the zeitgeist now that we have. So then I think I was largely talking to myself, you know, and my therapist, and my family. But I think also I was talking a lot about time, and time, strangely enough, was how I sort of self-diagnosed in myself before I was diagnosed, before I was hospitalized.
Yeah.
I had gone really, really, really deep into researching time for an English paper, and I came to the conclusion this is sort of as that my brain was speeding up and revving out, Lexapro 2021. I came to the conclusion that my perception of time was different than just about everyone that I spoke to. It was very easy for everyone in college. Everyone seemed very, very capable of staying on schedule and structure. And for some reason, that wasn't how my brain worked. I still have the essay to this day. I've never published it really, but it's like, um, I really learned to value quality of a moment more than the quantity of seconds or minutes it takes. I couldn't see how you could reconcile how much fun I was having learning all these things in school and meeting all these friends and playing chess with how slow school was, or how long it took to do, a particular thing. Maybe I was being impatient, but for me, the concept of duration and event time somehow became a kind of, I don't know, a cause that I championed. That clock time is fake. It doesn't make sense. And that's not how I see the world. So those are the things that I would talk about. But then you'd hear me talk really fast. You'd hear this guy go on and on and on about theoretical physics that I didn't really understand that well, and the relative perception of duration and all these things, and theories of everything and string theory. And I think those types of abstract concepts become fixations in a brain like mine, or perhaps yours too. And so people came to understand me for these big and weird ideas, but that's also a part and parcel of this diagnosis and this stigma, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I talked about bipolar then, but I also talked about all these weird things, and I was always the guy that had like a weird take on something. That's something I pride myself in. People come to me for a lunatic's perspective sometimes, or a gut check. They used to call me research and development in college, because I'd spend all day at home on a whiteboard, and it'd be like a party for me. So, later on that sort of paid off. But yeah.
Yeah. How did that pay off?
Oh well, I guess I went from, I'm embarrassed to say it, like arrogantly correcting professors in Spanish class. That's what I majored in, Spanish. And taking their marker and going up to the whiteboard and saying, that's not how this works, to helping my parents, actually I should say, like coaching chess. That's my first real job. And then I helped my parents overhaul their heating and air conditioning company, and eventually helped them sell it too, after 42 years in business. And that was my first job, like around the Great Recession, when I graduated. I graduated 2009. So HVAC, to co-founding an alternative learning environment based on the research of Sugata Mitra, who won the 2013 TED Prize. Again, like innovative ideas for learning, and taking courses on massive open online courses, taking things like Coursera and instruction, and really complex and advanced education, always appealing to me. And the need for being around those types of people that are into that stuff was always a draw. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be an inventor or work at a think tank. And eventually I got the chance to. So after, helped my parents with the small business, I got into selling software and social media or social listening software. And then I got recruited to a web agency to help build websites for Obama's administration, and then got fired. That CEO, he called me a self-taught hacker. I think it was an insult at that time. I think it was a wonderful compliment. He helped me start my own agency. So I ended up building websites for like DARPA contractors and executive recruiters and, all kinds of people, because I was really early to WordPress. That was what I got into. So eventually I started building apps, and eventually I even worked for the Apple Store for a bit, but it all came to fruition when I got an offer to lead an AI product in 2015. And I just completed a certification in product management, and I got snatched up pretty quickly. And before I knew it, I had I was working with like Obama's data science team, and I was working with the architects of IBM Watson, people that I met through my chess club friends, and I was bringing them to go work with me at this company, competing in this very small company with like Apple and Google, and eventually Microsoft too. So I got into innovation, which was ultimately where I knew I'd end up and where I needed to be. And whiteboards aplenty. I mean, you've looked at my my kitchen. I'm sorry, I'm ashamed to say it, but it's a bit of a mess. You can see.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I'm always scribbling on whiteboards, and so even at home, I used to have commercial whiteboards in the house, and anyway. Yeah. So getting to work, I would say, like my dream job was to work was when I worked at Capital One. I really enjoyed it there. I was hired by the most patented inventor at the time, and I got to lead a team that was building delivering the mobile payments application, like how you tap to pay on Android.
Yeah.
And it was weird because like when I interviewed there, I had like 12 interviews, 7 different teams. They didn't know where to put me, because what's a Spanish major knowing an agency owner, at this age? What does he know about all this engineering stuff? So I ended up getting to work for who I describe him as my Dr. Dre. And he really gave me a lot of opportunities and a big stage. And I think I proved myself when that whiteboarding led to some patents and a new line of business for Capital One in identity. I was really proud to work with those people. There's so many smart people in Virginia. It's the largest company here. And I sort of completed my singular career goal when I was like 36. I became a patented inventor. So yeah, it worked out all right for me, I'd say.
I want to talk about your other mission, the Bipolarist. Could you talk
Yeah.
a bit about that?
Yeah, I should say it's a bit of a misnomer. So I registered this domain, bipolarist.com, in 2016. And I did that um, after getting fired from that AI product lead job. I said, look, if this is how I'm going to be treated, where I'm going to keep getting fired by people that are like taking my ideas, but they don't want me to run with them, then maybe I'll just go into mental health advocacy, because people have been telling me I should write a book for, since I was a college kid. So ironically, Capital One ended up interviewing me for like a UX lead job months after I bought the domain, or like the spring that spring in 2016, and then I ended up getting approached again there and recruited and hired in July. So I sat on the domain for a while, and it wasn't until I went through a pretty big struggle, I'll say, getting managed out. That's the term they use
Mm.
at
Yeah.
Capital One. After I gave them 12 inventions, and put on and getting onto short-term disability, and eventually approved for long-term disability, much to their chagrin, and then poisoned again. I went through a lot. My midlife crisis hit at like 30, 36. My dad eventually got diagnosed. Well, he had heart, lung, and kidney failure, and he was given 2 weeks to live. And my mother had found that she had cancerous lumps in her breasts and had to have both removed. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and my manager was denying me accommodations that were justified and that my doctor had requested on my behalf, uh, basically to get rid of me. So, pretty epic win there, where uh, I pitched a product to Capital One Lab, and I wasn't really supposed to even be there. It was like a contest, and so I won it. It was, you know, no one had ever done that from outside of the group, and I'm really proud of the idea that I came up with, and they were too. So, um, bipolarist wasn't something that came up until I left and separated from Capital One, and until I went through this period of about 8 months. I got hospitalized 6 times. This is like at 37, and I got divorced. And so, in a weird psychosis, I had changed medications. My doctor prescribed a medication and didn't give me an antipsychotic, which, that's important when you're on a mood stabilizer, to have that as an insurance policy, is how I think of it. Make sure you don't get into what I call the noise that goes around a mood fluctuation. And that led me to believe that I was the bipolarist, instead of bipolarist being a resource or website or a community. And I really regret that. I really regret that. I felt like, you know what? Look, I just completed, I just left my dream job. I'm lucky to have graduated college, even though I was on the 9-year program, and ended up with a Spanish degree instead of philosophy or tech. And I'd been married. I had traveled. I felt like I'd lived a whole life.
Yeah.
So I said, forget this. If bipolarist is such a good name, call me the bipolarist. I'll take the flack for everybody like us. I can take the stigma. I just won. That's how I felt. So instead, I called myself that. I regret it because I really liked the name for the community, and maybe I should still pivot. You tell me. But bipolarist, in my mind, I think of it like an institute, a sort of organization that helps prevent the dilution of what is effectively a very strong brand that bipolar has. We talk about ending the stigma, and with mental health, and the reality is the stigma. Um, I mean, if anyone deals with stigma, it's the bipolars. I think bipolars and schizophrenics, schizoaffectives, that's really what the stigma is assigned to. It's not OCD. It's not anxiety. The symptoms that we go through, those are the ones they make movies about. That's what A Beautiful Mind's about. That's where the mad genius is. It's in this little like area of the DSM. The stigma is ours, and the stigma is real. And when we talk about ending the stigma, look, I embrace that we talk about it more. That's wonderful, you know. But let's not erase the struggle that people like you and I went through and still go through all the time to make it to where we have. Don't act like it was easy. Don't make it so that we're all the same. That's not reality. The way that we treat people with bipolar disorder in this country is, I think, equivalent to like a passive genocide. We I can go into the whole platform, but for me, someone needs to look out for us, because even if you're healthy, even if you take the medication, you're compliant with the treatment, you go to therapy, even if you're doing interviews and help promote the conversation, you're still bipolar in everyone else's eyes. And bipolar in the sort of stigmatized context, it means you're crazy. That's what they mean when they say that. When they say, oh, he's bipolar, they're not saying he's a genius. And there's high correlation of us that score well high on IQ tests. They're not saying that he's creative. I don't think. They're saying that when someone is bipolar, most times in that stigmatized tone, they're saying they're the problem, or they're, dysfunctional, toxic, violent, volatile. That's what people mean when they say bipolar, if they're honest with themselves. And so the need for ending the stigma is based primarily on how it affects our particular niche of this little book. It's about 3% of us in this country, and worldwide it's about 3%. And unfortunately, 40% of us attempt suicide. So, and I think it's like we're 10 to 20 times as successful. Those rates are not really approached or exceeded by any other niche or in any other popular part of the population. Maybe some veterans, maybe the transgendered community, but the things that affect us are somehow, it's okay for people to say whatever they want about bipolar. Very controversial figure in the media, but people can say that Kanye should suicide himself. That everyone's comfortable saying that. If you said that about other identity groups, I don't think that would go well.
No.
So I think of Bipolarist as kind of like, it should be the Anti-Defamation League. It should be someone or an organization checking everybody that you're treating us in such a way that you're depriving businesses, the workplace, the world of the gift that we do possess. There's a lot of us, and every person on earth, has something to contribute. But when you have such a high correlation of people with this diagnosis, with breakthrough creativity, very, very gifted people that deal with this condition, have a lot of things we could contribute, and as is evidenced by all the stories that you can find across history, and even people like us, right? And so if you treat us as they do, you miss out on what we can do. Companies are disabled by the same stigma that disables us.
Yeah.
But if there's no way, if we erase the stigma, basically we're discrediting the struggle. So for me, before we erase the stigma or we end it, I need there to be an accounting of what the stigma really is. And I think that's one of the other big initiatives that I try to take on. Is like, how do you quantify stigma? How do you put a number on it? How much harder is it in numbers for me to go get a loan from a bank when my organization's name is the Bipolarist or Bipolarist? I get offers, those credit offers from companies for my other DBAs, for other lines of business, but Bipolarist, crickets. So I don't understand how really we can act like the stigma doesn't exist or like it's getting easier. The treatment is effective. You know, the medicine has figured out how to help us, but society doesn't get to discredit the struggle that we, people that are still here overcome every day, and that historically people that haven't or had succumbed to it, I mean, were able to achieve in spite of. I want there to be a recognition of who the stigma affects. Maybe we deserve reparations.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Hit me up. I go by the Bipolarist on X, Bipolarist on LinkedIn, Bipolarist on Facebook, and bipolarist.com. You might also see me. I run peer support on Sundays for the Bipolar Social Club.org. You can find it's a Google group that was started by the co-founder of Kayak, Paul English. So you can see me Sundays on Eastern Standard Time. I'm usually there at 11 a.m. As a peer facilitator. But yeah, hit me up anywhere you can, and Google Bipolarist, you'll find me.